Please, you may start rolling.
Thank you, sir.
And then let me know when we can start filming.
Caesar, on your CODESA.
You happy with the sound? Thank you, sis. Ubhuti Zwelakhe Mthethwa. You are a prince.
I'm a prince.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Nyambose.
Yes.
Wena wadingiswayo.
Yes, well.
Thiwa omagaga. Ontsiba. No, that's beautiful. First, yazi my late father, he passed away in 2020. Kamala kwaku Zwelakhe.
Okay.
His second name was Phineas. It's quite symbolic njengoba sikhuluma ngomhlaba and the like ukuthi izwe elenu, izwe elakhe.
Yes.
I was born eMatadeni, section 4. Ubaba babemaze urider.
Okay.
Wayecoach ibhola efuya izinja e4. I don't know if you'd have any opinions.
Because
I don't know if you'd have any opinions on Matadeni and Newcastle in general.
In general, it's my neighborhood. What I can say about it, it groomed me. This is where I cut my teeth. My public speaking, by the way, started at Betamoya High School.
Shout out to Betamoya High. By the way.
Exactly. So I started in 1995 to address the school song, the whole school. And as the first one to do that as a student, normally it would be teachers who would conduct morning assembly. But our school was also unique. We had white and Indian teachers, Elokshi.
I didn't know this.
A bit more, yeah. So that's why my love with library was inspired by Mr. Cooks, who was a white Afrikaner who was teaching us Africans,
sure.
And which perfected my skill. And then career pathing wise, I standard 8 to go and visit the library in Newcastle, which was taboo, because I hate library. So you would have to save money. Now totally tuba during weekend, and you go to library for those few hours until 12. You study anything, do career pathing, because from standard 8, you needed to start knowing which path are you taking,
sure.
So that you apply when you reach matric. So Matadeni for me, it has actually helped me. Caesar Center, which is a place where we applied our trade on how to understand, to do computer studies. So after school, we go to Caesar Center, learn how to work on computer, because we are matriculants now. And then it also helped us with career pathing as well. We also did something very interesting with my matriculant classmates, the whole block, all the institutions. Because if you wanted to be a public manager, you must at least visit any of those institutions. If you want to be a bank manager, we visited my bank, post office manager, your retail stores. So hamba around so that we inform ourselves with, okay, we are getting into a real world.
This wasn't driven by Iskolo. This was just you guys.
It's us, and I'm leading that process.
Jeez, well done.
So, Yongi Kenge, all my peers, they knew what path are they taking. Successfully, Uguchi, Ekayat, can they afford for you to go to university? So, being a second born at home, Ubaba working at Group 5 as an administrator there, he saved money to say, guys, I don't have Isbaya, the crawl, because we are boys, 8 boys and 3 girls. Rather go to education, because there's a new system that is coming that is no longer going to be based on livestock. It's going to be based on education. So go and study. So that's why all our siblings, we went to school until number 11. Who's doing
number 11?
Number 11. We're 11 at home. One mother, one father.
Hey, olethi pubesmo. Amatama yang understand atshala, but olethi lakhiqiza 11.
Lakhiqiza 11, and all are doctors in different disciplines.
Really?
Yes.
Shout out to both your parents.
Yes.
I want to give a shout out, man, to Ikasle, to Matadeni.
Yes.
Duck Pond.
Yes.
In Newcastle, in KwaZulu. Shout out to Betamoya High.
Yes.
Shout out to where my mother taught, Hlalanathi High. That school also played a very pivotal role in my upbringing.
Yes.
Even though ngafunde Newcastle Senior, nasa Newcastle High, Etropin. But thank you very much for that. And just the link to Umkaya, and obviously the link with the Tamala Zwelakhe. I love your curiosity.
Yes.
And the fact that you take initiative. I was just this morning, we're recording this on the 30th of January, 2025. Just this morning on 94.7, Anele Mdota and her team, the Breakfast Club there, was speaking about children that take gap years. And what that spurred in my mind was, children take gap years, but they don't use those gap years to job shadow.
Exactly.
ukuthi njengoba usuthathe this gap year, of which most it's a lie. It's because awuthathwanga. It's because you improve. Usuqamba manga ukuthi gap year.
Yeah.
But they're not job shadowing so that they know at the end of those 12 months would know. I spent time in a hospital. I spent time in a retail. I spent time in a bank. I saw how these people work. I learned their salaries and I looked at my skill set. So I know exactly where I'm going.
Whilst you're on that point, as a product of that exercise of visiting my institution, 2 of my peers, they actually were taken direct from Matric to Itala Bank. That guy, Umatin Tube, he's been with Itala Bank over 20 years.
That's beautiful.
Out of that exercise.
Sure.
So we have a success story of what we did.
Just taking initiative.
You can imagine, I would walk from a section 6, the distance, every day going in and out. So I'm actually affirming, Oguti, there is a league of young people who took initiative. I imagine if we are 11, this means a man. So whatever you, Utubaba, there is no bursary for you or no money for you to continue studying. So perform well so that you get bursaries. I can only get you admin fees.
Sure.
After that, you are on your own. Why? Your siblings are just behind you as well. And he is the only breadwinner through employment. Mama is a seamstress, tailor, and she would sew impatha that we were wearing. Because by name.
I love the fact that your father had these conversations with you guys.
Yes, and he was very, and he told us, Mama also would have also a conversation as boys.
Sure.
Should you impregnate women? What I'm gonna do, I will take your underwears and to dress your kids because you're not working.
Yeah.
So this idea of you messing around, rather focus, and that helped us because we managed to be disciplined. Then in my neighborhood, there was also a tavern. But to Mama, what I don't want to see you joining those who are drinking there. No matter how close you are to a tavern, but focus.
Yeah.
And I know that my neighbor, obviously they were well off. And you also hear a smell of some spices coming out of their kitchen. And Tinangampa were doing cabbage and pap and probably pap and water solution. But here we are today. And
Papa nompupula.
Yes.
Uyibiza nge-water solution.
I'm educated. So, okay, there are those who don't even know that.
Sure.
So, in water solution, these scientists, kids, they will understand how to mpupula is kambele.
Sure. The last thing I want to say before I get into the official questions that I had sent to you prior. Your other name is Elijah. Elijah would be the name of a prophet in the Bible and arguably one of the most important prophets in Jewish history, to be fully honest.
Yes.
The meaning of Elijah, for people that may not know, is my God is Yahweh. Eli, Jah, you are God. You have become somewhat of a prophet. So I don't know, outside of Zwelakhe, one of those fights that you push for.
Yes.
The other one being, I believe I was meant to be a prophet of the people. Do you take that on as well? Sorry, kono uboyobla.
I do.
Sorry, la phezulu nje. Sure, okay. It's gone.
I do. You spot on. I think your analysis is right. I am using these 2 disciplines. Uzwelakhe is my native name, which has meaning because directly translated landlord.
Yes.
As if my great-grandmother who named me, I will tell a story. I think you need to know that. She was born in 1895. I had a chance to see her.
Great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother.
Not your grandmother.
Not my grandmother. Great-grand, which means umama kamkhulu. Yes, I had an honor. She died in 1988. So we have a photo with her while she was now paralyzed, but she was still strong. She would hit us with her rod, which was always pink and staying here. When she says, come and sleep next to me here. Why? Strategically, she can't walk to the toilet. So us being the younger ones, the older ones are fed up of taking care of her. So us, we would say, oh, go, all right. And then we'll assist. But the story is, she says this name was coined during a conversation at home when I was born, early hours in the morning. And then she says, what shall we call this child? In my uncle's house, there were 2 boys. And in my household, there are 2 boys with me now. Then everyone said, Izwelabo. It is the world of boys. What you call no. You are setting him up against his brothers. When you say it's their land or world, it must be his alone. So that there is no fight. If there is any treasure this young man will get, it must be his. And his siblings mustn't say, your name means it is a collective.
For all of us.
No, it's yours. But whatever that is, it is for you to discover that treasure, which I eventually did. Then the Elijah one, my great-grandfather was a bishop at Zion. So I grew up in Zion. Sasamba umlindelo, my night vigils, and it's only like high. So you couldn't avoid not attending church. And people come here at home for church.
Sure.
So we are forced. You can't dodge. And there's two. This is what they also, as a discipline, they will say, nobody's keep quiet. So when we come in the morning, everyone must testify. Just tell us, how have your week been like? No matter how small you are. And then now you are having stage fright in front of all these elders. You must stand up and say, Ngiyabonga, uNkulunkulu sangigcinile, I'm still alive till today. And for that, I'm grateful. After that, I ran out to go and play outside because they will start these long play songs of the Zionists. They will sing non-stop and pray long hours. And then to us, we have a short memory. Wow. But they will crack a whip once they see us playing outside. Kuno Koko would sit right at the door, just guarding those who are moving in and out. So we're coming from
But
there.
it was good training. I just want to emphasize
exactly
the idea of getting young children to get on stages, whether at home, at church, at school, and address a crowd of people does wonders for their confidence later.
When I talk about my public speaking, if I want to actually go even beyond Ebeta Moya, I can actually go to my church. Now, the interesting story about that is that as I grew, then I had to take my siblings to church. Now, we were fellowshipping Osizweni. So there's money involved from Ematatini going to Osizweni. Rather, there is an old lady and an old man who couldn't transport to Osizweni. So then they said, Wena, take your younger ones, your fellowshipper, Emma Romain. This household, you bring a service, especially for these two the grannies, because they are about to die, but they are yearning for a service on every Sunday. I had to now learn an art of reading scriptures and interpreting it for them. So I'm forced to listen to the radio because radio Zulu at that time, they would have prayers and pastors narrating a story, I think on 9 XN, also midday or afternoon, 9 episode. So I'm picking up verses for Sunday. I'm preparing into my And then when I get there, I give a rendition, we sing, we walk also from section 6 down to Emma Romain. It's quite a distance. And it's hot, scorching. But it's a discipline I did. My younger siblings, number 2, all my younger siblings, I would have to lead them. So my leadership also started from there. I was fellowshipping with the old granny. And then sometimes the church will say, let's fellowship this side so that we give them a broader church service. So I'm sharing those are nostalgic moments of my days. Now, a better moya, there was a crisis. Utisha saw me standing in front of my peers because Utisha kakafike class next day. We can't do morning assembly because it's cold. So they know that Zwelakhe, you are a Christian, why don't you address us? And I learned the art of keeping a small New Testament in my back pocket. And then, so they just ambushed me. Say, stand up and do what the teachers are doing there. And I said, okay, I can't betray the faith. I had to stand there. I stood up, the teacher waited outside, peeping through. So I said, this young man can stand up to his... And then it's quiet. They were shocked that you could address them. And for that, Utisha Wati, next week is my turn to conduct morning assembly. You will take the whole week for me. For the first time in history of Beta Moya, we have one of your own who will be addressing the entire assembly. Now, you can't address it in Zulu because we've got Indian teachers and white teachers. So you must learn then English. Then Utishu Mkulu Jeff Nkosi, the late, said, once you are a matriculant, start talking English, even on the veranda in your classes. When you make noise, rather make noise in English. Because you're going to university, we don't want you to embarrass us. So I had to prepare also a good, take a thesaurus dictionary, bombastic words to when you don't have content, at least, but you can throw in some bombastic words. It makes your story very So then a little bit of a verse and a little bit of English
with some bombastic words.
And then I'm also now attending a corresponding college on Christian studies, Bible studies, whilst I'm
in high school.
Whilst I'm in high school, because I took this thing very serious of faith. Because why I joined a student Christian movement is my grandfather was now the leader of the church. When he died, all the members disappeared.
Left. This is Umkhulu Wako that named you. That named you Elijah.
I'm named by the great-grandmother.
Okay.
Namakako.
Okay.
To say, Zwelakhe, not Zwelabo. So I was just sharing to say these two names for me, they're meaningful and they're playing an important role. That Elijah component, it's the spiritual discipline that enabled me when I completed my studies in 98, public management, to say something is wrong with this democracy. I was inspired. Let's say, let me pursue this, but you can't pursue it while you're in the institution. So you must be outside. I took a decision. And my small voice said, at least you will have to wait for 20 years. Because 20 years, some of these would have been dead and others will be old, they will be frail, but go expand the capacity of your understanding. What happened in 94? Because you were young. I picked up a very interesting compromises and sacrifices about our country's democracy. So when you ask me a question that says, do you believe in democracy? I will say there are two answers for that. I studied democracy, but I didn't practice it. As in government working, I knew it as a theory. I then had to learn the practical application of it. And I realized another product altogether is no longer democracy. How do I prove that? We are many as blacks, 78% at that time. But now, out of 62 million people, I can tell you that almost 80% are outside economic circulation. And you call this democracy. My understanding of democracy is that majority rule. Majority rule means decision will be made by those who are many than those who are a minority. The opposite is true. The minority are the ones who are making decisions for the majority, and the majority are outside any economic circulation. And we are actually in the labor force more than being owners of land, owners of buildings, owners equity, which is capital to run any business in this country. It's still like that even now. And this, for me, it's very bad that we have a family in South Africa that controls South Africa's economy more than government. That is very wrong for me.
A family?
A family, yes.
A1?
Oppenheimer family and Rupert. Oppenheimer from as far back as Ernest Oppenheimer Mkhulu Wako, the grandfather to Nikki Oppenheimer. Both three, they are running South African economy. They control the mining sector. They control not just mining sector, by the way. People, they think they are about mining. They diversified across all the retail in South Africa, property, farming. And then this is what they used to do, which I picked up during my 24 years. They would influence government through their opposition. So those who will win government will be a ruling party, Abilung. But they will support the opposition of other whites to be a pain on the neck of the ruling party. This is where Verwoed had a problem. Verwoed gets told by Professor Hook from University of Pretoria to say, do you know that as a Prime Minister of South Africa, you don't control the economy? It's controlled by Oppenheimer and Rupert. What Verwoed, where is evidence of that? Or gather evidence from Niggas? I said, I can't stand up in Parliament and talk about this thing when I don't have evidence. He compiled a report. On the 6th of September, 1966, he stood up in Parliament. Before he could even stood up, Dimitri Tsafendas stood up, came in through Parliament with a glass of water, pretending to be bringing water to the president, whereas he was hiding a knife. Used that knife to stab the president right in full view of everyone. He lied there, dripping blood, no one attending to him because the plan was that he must die there. And he died, having not read that report which came with Professor Hook. Till today, 70 years later, we don't know what was the content of that report. Now, but that is a glimpse of this family.
Sorry, we need to take it a bit slower.
Okay, fine.
A few notes before I come to what you're saying. Number one, we just need to emphasize I
was a student leader, even a student Christian movement, the Pentec, definitely. So, yes, you can say.
Number two, this is quite disturbing.
Yeah.
Is this public news? So we are aware that Hendrik French, I think he's seen as the father of apartheid, was murdered. Is this public knowledge that he was murdered? I mean, this is almost like Martin Luther King, because they tell us about I have a dream, but they don't tell us about how he spoke about the economic aspects. Are you saying that Hendrik Verwoed was murdered because he was about to speak about the economic situation in South Africa, and in particular maybe mention the Oppenheimers family?
Yes.
Is this public knowledge, or is this something that people don't know?
Most of you don't know it. Those who know it, within the white community, they know it. But obviously a certain class of white people. But mostly blacks don't know it because at that time, our struggle was something else. Remember, in 1966, Mandela had just gone into Robben Island. So Mandela, they knew what happened. But the story we were sold is that Verwoed died because it took Mandela to prison on Robben Island. Probably that's a narrative they would have sold. The real narrative was that Verwoed wanted to say, let's allocate the South African economy according to racial groups of South Africa.
According to racial groups?
Yes, which means whites getting a portion and then blacks getting a portion.
You think Verwoed wanted that?
Yes.
To share the economy with black people?
As a compromise. To extend this thing the two guys are controlling South African economy more than government. That's what he wanted. It is in that report.
Sure.
So
reports are equal. We can't find it anywhere.
The report is obviously classified because it is that report.
It's a classified document.
Yeah, it's a result of this. You will find in a book called "The Greatest Prime Minister of South Africa." It's a book.
The Greatest Prime Minister
of South Africa, which they're referring to Verwoed.
Are you saying this report currently exists and that it's a classified document?
We can.
And if that's true, that means what used to be the ruling party, which is sort of ruling now. Mm-hmm. The ANC has the power to release this report, and they've chosen not to.
ANC, they are a product of that. Okay, I then need to go further now.
Hendrik French Verwoed, South Africa's greatest prime minister. Sorry, I just wanted to get the author. Stephen Mitford Goodson.
Yeah, I think that would be him. Yes.
I hope that's the book. Okay.
Now, then I must go further. Then, when I say they are controlling the opposition, so what they will do? Finance the opposition in parliament to be a pain to the ruling party. They've been doing that for all these years. So this is what happened after 1966. BJ Forster, who succeeded to Verwoed, was part of that team of people who plotted.
Why you dingane for Mapun?
Yeah, because why a friend of the Oppenheimers, Nabo or Rupert, Uguti, the man is going to read the report about your economy, which you are controlling today. So we need to come up with a plan. This you'll find in the book.
You're not worried about raising this type of stuff if you're saying it's so dangerous?
This is my approach. I am an expert in public management. So whatever happens in government, when I share this, I'm oozing out knowledge. So unless you guys don't want me to be dumb and come here and advance a narrative,
sure.
I'm upfront with you.
Sure.
This I would say, even if I'm not in politics.
Sure.
Because how many months have I spent in politics? 6 months. So I've got 24 years outside government.
Nyambos, I just want to say thank you, man, for your bravery, because I know what happens when narratives like this. I mean, everyone says it. Everyone says the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts control the country, clamp it through the Rothschilds who funded the Oppenheimers, etc., etc. But very few people have been able to articulate at least what you're saying now, almost as a direct question mark to say, okay, forget black, because that's easy. And Abelungu always, you black people. We're saying now white Afrikaners.
Right. Yes.
We're trying to ask you guys to please go and find this report and go and figure out what's going on and what Verwoed was trying to do.
Yes.
So that we can have a conversation, not so much to vilify a family, but to say there's something wrong with this country and we need to fix it.
We need to fix it. Now, this is the point. The reason why I'm sharing this, because I think that's what you're asking. I'm sharing this so that when we say we want a national debate, can you go back in history and talk about this thing? You know why we should talk about this is because we are still stuck. 70 years later, the same family are still controlling. So what does it say? It means we have not moved an inch. The Mandela miracle didn't do anything to change this thing. Okay, I was about to say to you, post-1966, all the succeeding presidents were actually controlled by these guys because they are guarding this report not to be read. So these are secrets where all presidents, when they come to office, they would know that somebody controlling the economy.
All of them?
All of them.
You're not excluding anyone?
I'm not. So from Verwoed, P.J. Foster, P.W., Botha, de Klerk, they know until Mandela. Mandela knows about this. Okay, there is an interesting story about Mandela. In 1950s, you'll find it in the same book. It is said that the Oppenheimers said to Mandela, can you just go to one of my tailors just to scoop up your image and get a nice suit for yourself? So we saw Mandela wearing nice suits with an opening line here. But what we don't know is that why Tungelwa or Oppenheimer was said, go to my tailor. But the reason I'm sharing that part, how ironical that in the 50s, Mandela being given a suit by the Oppenheimers, and I assume it must be Ernest because Ernest died around 1957. Ernest Umkhulu. And then after that, Mandela, when you read front page of USA Today in 94 on the 20th of June, it is said, I am the power behind the victory of the ANC in US.
This is a real story.
It's a front page. Kusho Oppenheimer.
The son.
Oppenheimer, shuthi manje lo ophilayo manje. Usho in US front page uthi I am the victory behind, or the power behind the victory of the ANC. Do you know what does that mean? It means what we were celebrating as a liberation in 1994 being conducted by one of our own is a staged 1994 victory because somebody is claiming it as his own. Now,
you check at some point, but thank you.
So then it explains then why in 30 years we've not moved an inch as a country to better the lives of the people. It's because we, in law, we call it bad faith, mala fide. We negotiated in mala fide, in bad faith. Because the opposite of mala fide is bona fide.
Yes.
So, as we were negotiating, we compromises. So we were compromised. And actually a harsh term would be we were outmaneuvered. That is the right term. So which means, no wonder nothing is changing. Here is then my narrative. How do you say you're liberating us, but you're using the same laws that oppressed you? You still keep them. How do you interpret democracy? How do you interpret liberation? You through the lens of the same laws that oppressed and dispossessed you. How do you deal with Section 25, property section in the Constitution, and you refer to 1913, which 1913 is the day on the 19th of June in 1913 where a law was passed, Herzog Bill, on the disposition of the land of the kings and black people for all the towns and cities of South Africa. If you notice, all blacks are staying outside town. Whites are staying inside town.
Yes.
It is through the Forced Removal Act.
Correct.
So, if the law can be used to remove a certain race from prime land, and then you keep that law, and you call this dispensation democracy, liberation of those who were dispossessed. But now you have the court system, the judiciary, in the separation of powers. You have the judiciary which uses the same law. This I discovered when I go to Parliament. We have departments that are still referring to old order laws before 94. So which means we are still running things the way they were. Just take a sugarcane industry. Sugarcane industry is still using 1978 Act that regulates the sugarcane industry. What do you expect? Do you think there can be new players that can come into that space who are black? If you are still using 1978 Act, we are using an act which was equivalent to my age when I was born.
As Nyambos, I've got questions for you here. Nyasaba, because I know you're an amazing orator. I've got questions for you here, and I don't know how quickly we can get through them.
Yeah, go shoot.
But you're sparking a very deep,
I'm showing
political
you,
and philosophical conversation.
What I don't want, whatever questions you've prepared, I'm just showing you there's depth in what you are asking, and there's more which you couldn't conceptualize in your drafting of those questions, because these things are interlinked. I mean, I took 24 years, so which means when I talk to you, everything is linked because our problems are interconnected. And the black cat in the dark room are the same white people that we love so much.
If we don't get to the questions, I'm gonna read them at the end just so that they
you can read the question.
Somewhere.
Let's allow the conversation to flow, whichever direction that it flows,
like it to flow.
so that you don't break it. Because the important thing is to educate people.
Yes.
Now, the reason why I'm talking about this, I am qualified in public management. So you can shoot me. You must blame my teachers, my lecturers, who taught me public management, economics, governance and politics, public law. They taught me this, and they sparked my imagination to say, hang on. But you must also give me credit. I would have easily... Do you know that I was already headhunted to join government as far back as 98 when I finished? We were the first graduates after 94 who were qualified in public management and management of local government. So they needed us as blacks to become front. And then... Izolo, I was in front of the building, number 55 Marshalltown, which is where Anglo said, Zwelakhe, come and work for us. We'll give you a corner office there on top in 208. I had to say no. You know why I said no? I came back home after the first 10 years in the 24 years. When I came back home, I went to Mthethwa because in Mthethwa, Vryheid. I picked up that the same Anglo removed our palace in Vryheid to throw them in Paul Petersburg. And then they dug coal for over 100 years there. And they never gave us anything. Had I worked for Anglo would use me as a scapegoat to say, Zwelakhe, I worked for Anglo. The money that should have gone to them Mthethwas, it was enjoyed by him alone.
I need to get my book with my pen. Thank you. I need to take notes here. So what I'm going to do now, because we might not get to the questions. I want to challenge everything you've said.
Yes.
To give a perspective so that we can have an engaging conversation about this thing. Yeah.
One more or you're free?
No, I'm still.
Today is going to be a chat here. Sizobona isigcina phi abafana basemadadeni.
Yeah, no, we are homeboys. So whoever have a problem with what we are talking, these are homeboys talking. So take this conversation as guys who grew in the same neighborhood but who have moved into different directions, and how we're telling the world our experiences. So I'm the fruit. If somebody has a problem with what I'm saying, I'm the fruit of the education system of this country. Then somebody has a problem with that.
Okay. Let's see where we're starting. Let me see if I can link these two. You spoke about the Oppenheimers. I wanted to link them to the kings, and then you spoke about Anglo, and you spoke about the palace of Mthethwa. Vryheid, who were moved to Paul Petersburg. Now, the first thing I want to ask is this. The Oppenheimers come to South Africa. They managed to raise funding via the Rothschilds family. to buy a stake into Cecil John Rhodes' diamond business. I think Barney Panato and those guys tried.
They were called South African Rand Laws.
Of course,
some
Rand Laws.
That book, yeah.
Barney Panato bahluleka beza bazoyisamela igolide la eGoli. And then they built their wealth here.
Yes.
And then other guys would expand, Anglo being one of them. With the Oppenheimers coming here, they did very well for themselves. So at some point as black people, we need to get out of being black and being oppressed and put ourselves in the shoes of them. To say, here's Mthethwa. He arrives in France, or he arrives in, trying to think of a rich Middle East as an example. And he's funded by Mutsipe or whoever, or Dangote or Mansa Musa back in the day. And he invests in oil fields or whatever the case may be. And he builds wealth.
Yeah.
And in the building of that wealth, he needs to protect that wealth because he's not there for the Arabs. He's not there for the Europeans. He's there for the nation of Mthethwa and the African lords who are now going to become oil barons there. Would you blame the Oppenheimers for what they did? And in that question, how different would the Oppenheimers be to the royal family in the United Kingdom with the British colonies that they had? And now bring it back to black, and specifically me and you, the Zulu kings that we've had, who also in whatever way managed to secure a piece of land and build a Zulu kingdom. And today, if ever someone came to threaten a king, came to threaten the Zulu royalty and sovereignty, would they not be taken out? And are we not just sour because we're on the losing side versus understanding the strategy of why maybe Oppenheimers or anyone else would have to do the same? Because you've got a Zulu king today who is a custodian of 2.8 million hectares of land, who also wouldn't necessarily want to split that land in any way, not just for Zulu people, but for South Africans in general.
It's nice to talk like that.
Sure.
Then you are forcing me to give you context.
No problem.
Every question you are raising, you are challenging what happened. Life is lived by going forward, but is learned by looking backwards. So in this case, do you know that what did the Oppenheimer said when he was the first mayor of Kimberley? He said, let us stop the natives from digging diamonds. Yeah, only us as settlers who must dig. He makes a law, a bylaw in local government. So you are saying we must condone him for stopping you as a native to participate in the economic circulation. That's my first problem.
Ndlovu, I just want to help you. For people that don't know,
Yes.
South Africans used to mine comfortably before some of those laws. The laws were set because we used to dig. Forget Amazama today. We used to dig and mine our own minerals. And you're very right. In the Oppenheimers became the first. They formalized politics in this country. And you're very right. And I think that Kimberley Act still rules the diamond industry to this day, globally, not just...
It's a Kimberlite process. We call it that.
The Kimberlite process.
Yeah, our Mineral Resources and Petroleum Development Act of 2002, amended in 2004.
Yes.
Now, I'm coming from the mining space, so I know what I'm talking about. So I'm not discounting what you are raising. I let your view prevail. I'm bringing another perspective. That's what in art, there is what we call perspective. Where you're standing. So you're saying that because of where you are standing. Let me stand on another angle. So I've just shown you an angle. The very administrative system of local government we're having today was perfected by the Oppenheimers in Kimberley. First street lights were in Kimberley. And then he says, Tina Bamnyama, we must not participate. So that's my first problem.
Correct.
I don't mind about economy. Yeah, you're right before. All of us were digging. I'll give you another example. Ulang al-Balel, Wamatlupi, Escort, MJs. They were working at Kimberley. And they were able to bring guns from those whites who were trading there. But the same whites, they were envying his land, Escort, Khwezi, you name all those areas, the Ladysmith. Then they charged him for carrying guns which he obtained as articles of exchange Because there was no monetary economy at that time.
Yes.
So unginikeza isibhamu and then uthathe lokho okuthathayo.
Yes.
Which means mhlambe ngigubhile amadayimani. Kodwa manje anginayo imarket. I don't have the market for this.
Yes.
Because you've got a market overseas of diamond. Take this diamond, but I'm interested to your gun for one reason. Hunting. Not just to kill people, but hunting primarily. But yes, in case I'm under threat,
Sure.
I will shoot and kill.
For defense.
Yes, it's defense. So we trade that. Now they figure that they pass a law, they say you are charged for holding guns, which is unlicensed. Bamthatha bamfaka Robben Island. Mandela is not the first one to be in Robben Island.
Ulanga Lbalele is the gentleman of where
Kwalanga
Township in Cape Town
Ulanga
is named
Township
after.
is named after him because when he was released from Robben Islands, he was dumped Kwalanga.
Kuthiwa kwaba noHlubi unkosi.
Amahlubi, inkosi oHadebe, omthimkhulu.
oRhadebe.
Amahlubi, yes. Ulanga Lbalele, kwaku 1873 when they took him there.
1873.
Yes.
And you're saying he was the first prisoner in Robben Island?
Not the first,
One of
but
the first.
one of them. Yeah, Amakosi, most of Amakosi, when the whites landed here, they took a lot of kings into Robben Island for imprisonment, including Amakoi and the San people. Now, I'm flagging your questions and giving context so that we don't get carried away by your narrative that you are advancing of amassing economic participation, but being ignorant of factors that are also involved in this.
Yes.
That was the perfection of apartheid. Apartheid was perfected in the mining sector.
By the British, or not
By
even the
them,
British, by settlers wherever they came from in Europe.
Every player who participated in the South African mining process,
Sure.
they perfected. Apartheid isuka lapho where they say natives must not participate. It didn't end in Kimberley. Then it came to PWV, Pretoria, Witwatersrand, and Verwoerd. The entire mining industry started to envy blacks participating. I'm bringing another context. A Pilgrim's Rest. KwaShiba, Shiba mine, a gold mine, is named after isizwe sakaShiba, Maswati. The understanding is that babona the Shiba building their crawl with gold. And then never figure out, oh, please sell us this precious stone or allow us to explore this gold and we'll name this mine after you. That's why it's called Shiba Mine. I met the queen.
Nabo Shiba, they were flexing, making crowds out of gold.
Exactly. No,
Yes.
but I market. You must understand as an economist. I'm an economy student. So
Sure.
in the event whereby there's no market, it's a closed economy. Monetary economy is the yesterday thing. We used to do barter trade.
Yes.
So that was economics at its best at that time because Ubati gave us these stones in exchange for this. So they were supposed to go into a joint venture, a Shiba Mine, Barberton. They named it after them, still called even today.
Shiba mine.
They never gave them anything. This I'm taking from the queen herself we met 2 days ago. She says,
The queen of the Shiba people.
Of the Shibas, yes. She says, since that mine is called Shiba Mine, is mining gold, one of the best, they are not getting anything. They ended just with the name saying Shiba Mine. She went on to say, even the farms around there, macadamia farms and so on, they took all of that and drove everyone else. It's not far from where Lily Mine, the mine that collapsed of the mining, the mine in Lily Mine, it's a Barberton. Kune gold there. They don't participate. You know why they don't participate? It's the precedent set by the Oppenheimers. So here are the ones you are envying to say they've done well. Yes, give them credit for having done well, for perfecting the South African economy, but also give them credit for perfection of apartheid.
Yes.
We're excluding the natives. So if blacks are excluded, it is on record, it is them. With proof. Now, let's go on then to say the issue of us. There was a meeting in 1884 of kings of Europe and presidents of America. It's called the Berlin Conference. It started on November 1884 to February 1885. they were scrambling for Africa. It's a book. It's a thick book, about 600 pages. It says The Scramble of Africa. Here are superpowers of the world now dissecting the entire continent as colonial thefts for themselves, changing the cultures of those people. No wonder Africa, we have Portuguese, we have French, we have British countries and so on, because a decision was taken, let's change these people's culture in order to use them easily. Remember, Lord Macaulay said, I've never seen such rich people in Africa staying in peace, no crime and nothing. But if we want to oppress these people, we must change their spirituality and their education system, sell them the European culture. Once Africans see an alternative to what they know, they will drop their own to take the foreigners' practices. Once they do that, they are perfect candidates for oppression. These are the same people. This is the narrative they're driving. So I want you to be aware that in the narratives we are driving of economic participation, there is also a narrative of exclusion, of oppression, of killing. What is happening in the DRC now? It is a military practice when they say the best time to invade a country, it is when there is war. So which means we must stage these wars so that during the warring time, we loot. And then we arrive at settlement of peace.
Of course.
We would have looted everything by that time. That's how it works. So your attachment with outfits of democracy, whether you love democracy or not, I say it's not about democracy, it's about interest. US narrative on democracy is not that they're pursuing democracy, they're pursuing interest. Let me shock you. Currently, they are moving the treasury in the US. They want to use, what is this gas? The nitrogen gas, something like that.
Okay.
To produce energy, which is unlimited. This is the next bearer of value in the treasury. Now,
Nitrogen gas?
Nitrogen, yes. Which we have it in abundance. Yeah. They are already eyeing that. Now, what does that say to you? Do you think they will come in peace and say, let's transact and let's be partners in that? Or they will bulldoze your way out using all their might? It is in their practice. Go to literature. You will find a plethora of invasion of countries because there's an interest. So I'm advising those who are attached to outfits of democratic systems, capitalism, communism. Those things don't work. When there is an interest, we can use democracy as a medium, but to arrive in the end. It's a means to an end. It's not the end. The end is interest. What is it that you're interested in? So your Oppenheimers, they're interested to all our precious minerals. The Marinsky platinum belt, PW platinum belt. And they don't want anyone to take that. Okay, let me go to mining. You know why in 94, do you know that it took 10 years for the Mineral Resources and Petroleum Development Act to be passed in South Africa? And do you know the damage that happens between the 10-year space, which means we were using the old order mining law? And they were moving out gold, they were moving all the mineral unchecked because the laws allowed them. Yeah. So it is deliberate that MPRTA was suspended for a long time. Do you know how they came to sign it? We had to devalue the rand so that they lose. After they realized that they are losing their shares, they came to the table to sign that law. Otherwise, they didn't want to sign it. That was 2002.
Who devalued the rand?
Oh, yeah. Now you're asking the question.
Sorry.
Yeah, now maybe let's dwell in that question. This devolution of the rand, Nina, you are stuck with the idea that markets are the one that shapes the devolution of currencies. Those who control economies, they stage devolution of currencies as well, which means if I want to force a particular country to take a certain decision, what I do, I crash the economy just temporarily so that you get your way. Once everyone is willing to comply because their interest, their pocket is affected, you hold them at ransom. That's what the Rothschilds do. The war between France, I think, and England, if I'm not mistaken, they controlled the communication during that war.
Correct.
They send a wrong signal that says the other is winning and the other is losing. When they realized that, we are losing in England, they started selling all their shares. As they sell their shares, they got them cheap. They were standing already to pocket everything. When the truth came to say, no, man, they were lying, those guys. It's late. You've already lost. That's how they got to control most of the reserve banks in the world.
I'm trying to figure out if you're saying it took 10 years for the Mineral Acts or the Mining Acts to be signed, and how it happened was through the devaluation of the rand. I'm asking who devalued the rand so that the mining bosses could sign?
Is those who control it. So which means what you do.
It wasn't our government. It wasn't black people. It was between
which means
global markets and the owners.
Yes. Okay, this is what happened.
Sure.
South Africa is sought after by all the powers of the world.
Correct.
So what do? If you want to oust your opponent, go to his enemy.
Sure.
And say, hey, this guy is oppressing me here and he doesn't want to give me. Okay, let me put it plain. The Russia situation and the Ukraine situation.
Sure.
So those who support the Russian faction, they would go to Russia and ask for help if they have problems with the US. That's how they play it. So in the world, it's demarcated. This scramble of Africa. In South Africa was Britain. Zimbabwe is Britain. Botswana is Britain. Namibia is German. And Mozambique is Portuguese. And Angola. Cameroon is divided into two. You have a French speaking and English speaking. And then, so those same superpowers that control and colonize these countries in Africa can be used at any time when somebody has an interest to say, call that one to deal with the other.
Okay.
That's what happened in Cape Town. In Cape Town, the Portuguese perfected the art of navigation on the sea. But they didn't ring fence their interests. The Dutch looked at them and used and perfected that and established a port in Cape Town. Dutch East India Company.
Yeah.
But also they were relaxed because now they're the only one who supplies spices to Europe, to the Queens and so on. Britain came in envying what they have discovered. And there was a British East India Company as well. So Cape Town had 3 superpowers in a row. Same in Mozambique.
Yeah.
You had also the British who came. The Dutch came. The Portuguese came. All these ports, they were powers. So in the same manner, to pass the mining law, you must go who controls here. So you've got Rio Tinto here, you've got Impala Platinum, you've got Goldfield. So others are aligned to Britain, others to French, others are aligned to Australia. So what you do, you will find others, they don't have problems as like the others got problems with South Africa independence or liberation. So go to those. It's them. Let them fight each other.
Sure.
Let them give you a tip how you deal with this thing. And that's how they do it.
And this wasn't for the benefit of black people.
No, it was not for the benefit of black. It was about whoever. If I helped you to plunge the economy temporarily, it means I'm the last man standing. So you can partner with me and give me more of the spoils. Because these others, they didn't want to come to the table, but you leaked the intelligence. So the fight between the superpowers is about turf wars. To say, hey, when I came here first, I planted my flag here, and you guys are coming to uproot it and you're putting yours. It's not about you. In fact, I brought a paper. It is written, the economy is not for a black man. The black man is busy with barbarism of cultures and all their ignorance. So they are not counted in the issue of economy and civilization. We are colonies of exploitation and we are colonies of settlement. We are colonies of contestation. What does that mean? It means when the superpowers are contesting the same country for the same thing. So you'll have France fighting with the English in one country to say who will get the lion's share. So all these tenders, let's take the arms deal. The arms deal had outfits of Italy, your Turkey, your Germans, you name them. All of them, they bidded. But whom do you take eventually? Is the one who will give you a better deal to oust the rest. And whoever that is controls you. So it's not about your liberation, where now you are still just falling for crumbs. So that's why in 30 years, my blacks have not moved an inch from where they were. Also, this is what I want to teach our people. When whites are claiming that they are very good, let me tell you as blacks, for them to be good, it meant they had to oppress you. And so there's no equal starting. We are not on par on the race. I tie your leg and then you start the race and you fall, he runs ahead. And he perfects the art of running. Then he comes to say, I'm a good runner.
Of course.
And then I sell the books to say, this is how you can run. But that was perfected at your expense. So let's come to the laws. When you pass 1913 Land Act and you take our land, now that it is 94 and now Mandela gets into office, you are expecting us to be better off. Yet you have put sunset clauses that said don't change anything in terms of economic structure, in terms of ownership of the economy. You're still putting impediments, you're putting conditions in the settlement. And that's why we were compromised. So when we are not doing well, do you know that the asset register of the state got lost? When Mandela got into office, do you know that? The first minister of public works, check, I think it was Mama, the late Stella Sigao. Check her.
Yes, she used to be with was it Transkei?
Yeah,
I think.
Exactly. Then she announced, I was doing my first year, and she announced to say, the asset register of the state is lost. Do you know the implication of the loss of the asset register of the state? It means we will not know what the state owned. It turns out all whites are now owning property buildings, they're owning game parks, they are owning everything. So I asked the question, was that not a perfect recipe for a state capture investigation that we should have heard? Nobody picked that up till today. Our constitutional court couldn't do that. And then we are sold a narrative of the Indians, the Guptas who came in 90s. And they're saying they control the economy. Where I'm reading the books, I'm a public finance person, I don't see those Indians. I see Oppenheimer for 70 years. So you can't hoodwink me and tell me who owns what. I know who owns what. Okay, if you say, yeah, where do you get that from? Go read a book called South Africa Incorporated Oppenheimer Empire. Now I've answered you. South Africa Incorporated Oppenheimer Empire, published in 1988. And that book, it explains how South Africa is an empire of the Oppenheimers. Now, I then took a step further to calculate what did he own?
South Africa Inc., the Oppenheimer Empire.
Yeah.
I just want to get the authors.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Get the authors.
David Pallister, Sarah Stewart, and Ian Lepper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, in that book, it talks about them and everything we see in South Africa, everything that moves, it is recorded in that book. So it tells you that in 1988, he owned 6,000 companies. So 35 years later,
6,000 companies.
6,000 companies, which means that includes everything that moves in South Africa. Yeah. By 2007, I counted that we had over 500,000 companies registered at CIPRO. So the 6,000 would have quadruplicated by 35 years later. But what is also sickening is that 35 years later, we are still controlled by the same man. I checked last year, February, he was still the top man. Now, I think they are alternating with Rupert to say now he's on top, but it's immaterial. The point is these two have been doing this for a long time. So all the economy you get to see in South Africa is diversified around one people. And then, but now this is the gist of it. They then took a decision to say the entire white race in South Africa must be cushioned by their wealth, not blacks. So which means when you see every white person is cushioned by this, the welfare of the whites will be determined by their control of this economy. So that's why they are better off. They're looking after their own. Hele hak some in Afrikaans.
Hak?
Some, yeah. Now, at your expense. So I don't have a problem with these guys, but what I have a problem as a lawmaker is that they influence the laws. They don't want Roman Dutch and British law to be removed to allow for native law. Why it's good for their business?
Yes.
Because when you pass a law, that law becomes a language of business. But it's only decoded in that original that law. It can't be decoded through Zulu law. NgesiZulu ngithi ngiyotrader laphana ama-diamond exist i-language your trader in Zulu. So what does it say? There's a problem with this law. If you don't change it, it influences your business participation. You will always have to scramble for access, and they make sure you don't participate.
I want to go back to my questions. So part of my question was, how different are what the Oppenheimers have done to, let's say, the Zulu kingdom and any black kingdom, which also, when it conquers and dominates and builds an empire, doesn't include other people? How different is that? I made the example of the Zulu kingdom that is at king after king after king. Is it possible for someone outside to come in and be a king, to get a piece of the land, to enjoy any economic opportunities within the Zulu kingdom? And then what I wanted to link to this question was, why would you not take an opportunity to join Anglo? Because especially as a form of reparations and trying to find justice for your people, you would have been primed to sit inside there and ensure that a lot of the resources go back to maybe buying the land, getting as many people Mthethwa into the company to enjoy the spoils. Because how else do reparations work if you don't come in and sit at the table?
It's a lie. Says you can quote me for that.
Sure.
I'll prove it to you. I came there, Mthethwa. I saw a report of Anglo of 2002. They're lying in the report, saying, we have given back the Mthethwas their land. And they are saying, now, they took the land, they are returning it to communities, not Epcosin, that's why. They then say to these communities, must register trusts so that they release these land pockets to those communities. They don't rehabilitate the land where they were digging.
Yes.
Dams are sitting there as we speak now.
Sure.
Now I know law. In the deed of trust, they wrote a very fine line that says, food steward, which means we return this land as it is. So the Mthethwas must receive it as it is, with caves and hole, which are health hazards. It's your baby. You removed all the coal, you sold it, and now you say, I'm returning your land. Go, if I had much, see what's happening there. So, me not joining, it had nothing to do with not, okay, I must give a precursor why I didn't join. I'm leading a youth in energy and mining a group. We want to participate in the mining space. They invited me for an interview. They told the public that Zwelakhe want him to work for Anglo. And then when I got there, I said, no, I don't want to work for you. I want us to be partners because I know the Mineral Resources and Petroleum Development Act allows us to be partners as a Black economic empowerment. They laughed at me. They said, we're focusing on the superstar Blacks, which means your Saki Makozomas, your Tokyo Siowales, your Patrice Motsipes. Who are you? So they don't allow you to use the very law which I was party in its enactment.
Sure.
So I thought I'm taking the cue from the law.
Yes.
They say no. So even this law is a front to say we are empowering you.
Of course.
We are actually micromanaging you.
That is correct.
Now, this is what they're doing. Once they take you in as a black face, you become a black shield against government.
Correct.
So when government comes to do a scorecard to do the checks and balances in terms of compliance with the mining charter, management participation, procurement, corporate social investment, skills development, you name it, they tick the boxes because that's what qualifies them to get the license. So you become a leverage for them to acquire more licenses for themselves, not for you. So you make us look good.
Sure.
The blacks who work there, they are there in strategic position like your governance and licensing, stakeholder management. They are managing government and they send a black person to manage their own black government.
Of course.
Before Bonham, they sit in this strategic position, exploration, you name it. So let's talk about the scorecard. I wanted to implement the scorecard. I called them Anglo. I said, Oppenheimers Mthethwa, payback, according to the Mineral Resources and Petroleum Development Act. What they do, they change from Anglo. Now they're calling themselves Tugela Resources. So what they do, they change outfits.
So they can be we were not involved.
No, we are not involved.
That was Anglo.
It was Anglo. Now we are Tugela Resources.
We are a new company.
This is why they don't want this law to be removed. Then I challenge them.
It's very smart and strategic of them, by the way.
Exactly. So then I say to them, okay, after the law, I know the law of jurisdiction. Law of jurisdiction dictates that the law must take the cue from the natives of that land. But when I go to London, I get excluded because I'm a non-citizen. But when I'm in South Africa, I see London decent thriving or British decent thriving in South Africa because the law we are using, it is their law. And Dutch and Rome.
Yes.
How did we allow that a foreign law be used in a foreign land, yet for Africans, their laws don't apply in any of the European or American country? So something is wrong with the law.
But it's conquest. We know the answer. We have never conquered anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Now you're coming to conquest. So you were asking something about the Zulus.
Yes.
At some point, the Zulus, for them to become military like this, the reason why KwaZulu is not developed as it is supposed to be, the very same land, which is under the king, just to defend that land, it took us the 200 years. Why? Because the settlers, they kept on coming. Ushaka died as a result of their plotting. They said.
Like that story of Verwoed. And what's the guy who killed him? Sorry, his name?
So Dimitri. the story, Verwoed ubulawa Dimitri offenders
who was sent.
Who was sent into
Ushaka, you're saying people were sent.
So even Ushaka, what happened is that Abelungu, Sir Henry Finn and Farewell arrives in 1824 in King Shaka's palace. And they are saying, because we have come to pay our respect and we would like to come and stay with you and jail with your people and be part and be one with you. But you needed to go and read a book called The Olden Times in Zululand and Natal by A.T. Bryan, published in 1920.
Sorry, please give me the name again.
The Olden Times.
Times
in Zululand and Natal by A.T. Bryan. Bryant, Bryant.
Thank you.
Published in 1929. It has 2 volumes. In that book, there's a chapter there, the paramountcy of the Mthethwas. Now, these whites, they stay in King Shaka's palace, but you know what they were doing while they are staying there? They are doing what is called, who is the weakest link and the strongest link in this kingdom. When you read the book, it further says, upon realizing that we cannot build a British port in Durban, so because there's a strong kingdom in the interior, so let's rather, under pretense, go and pay our respect to the king, but study the coast. Once we find the weakest link, and then this was the plot. The Cape Governor in 1828 had given an instruction that said that we want to establish a British port so that we go to the east or far east to get the spices, take over the businesses of the Dutch. But Durban is a perfect landing point to refurbish our ship and repair them. So let us establish here, but you can't establish. The Zulus are very militant. Now, this king was existing at the time who was very much famous. And at that time, Undunankulu was Uswango, who brought these whites into. Uswango is the descendant of the Mthethwas who are in Vryheid today. Where in Umkabai, the aunt to King Shaka is also buried in Vryheid. Then he says, make sure that you get the strongest link in the lieutenants of King Shaka. Let them be the ones who kill the king. That's why Umbopakastai, Mhlangane, Utingane, Nomkabai were labeled in Zulu literature as the killers or the plotters of the king. But you needed to study British history to understand why would our own kill our own. It is because of their interest. Their interest was about purely business, but using this port to get all the spoils from in the interior and send it to Europe.
Blaise Compaoré, also a friend of Thomas Sankara, would be the one to assassinate him.
Exactly.
But you'd see who would then benefit after the death.
After the death, exactly. So what I'm trying to say is that for us to be where we are as the Zulus, from Shaga's time, Shaga witnessed the whites coming and he saw their strategy. Then he said, let us unite those ranks. Let's reinforce more tribes come under to withstand these people because they're coming by force. Remember his last words that he pronounced. He said, oh, Mbopakastai, now Nyangulala, you are killing me. But you will never rule this land. It will be ruled by the birds of the air. It was a nostalgic statement when I saw my brothers killing me. But at that time, there was no one to decode. It took up until 1929, from 1828, when a book, at least about that story, is written. And that's where we can decode what were the intentions of the British coming to the palace. And the governor saying, make sure the king doesn't die through the hands of white people, which is still happening today. When you see blacks killing one another, they are made to do that because somebody's benefiting. Whilst you are fighting, that's why my narrative says, impi yomuntu omnyama, nomunye umuntu omnyama ayinasitoko, which means a fight between a black on black fight has no crown. So even if you want to do it, understand why are you fighting. Rather, you will be shocked to find there's a third party, and the third party is not one of your kind.
As we're filming this, I just want to mention, I saw a clip because they're trying to have peace talks about the eastern parts of the DRC. And the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, I saw this clip just this morning, was addressing indirectly the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, saying that Cyril Ramaphosa is pretending that he's there for peacekeeping. On his part, he's saying M23 rebels are not Rwandan, they are Congolese, according to him. And then the other thing is he dared President Ramaphosa. He says, you guys keep threatening us. And I'd like you guys to take action so that we can react accordingly. And then it becomes to what we're discussing right now.
Exactly.
Rwanda and Paul Kagame end up fighting South Africa and Cyril Ramaphosa. Black lives get lost. And after those things happen, because people will say whatever they're reading, we are asking everyone watching to say, after that fight, black on black, please see who is benefiting the most.
Exactly.
Because there lie the clues of why there are any fights anyway. It's nice to see anyone can be angry with anyone else. Russia and Ukraine, Putin versus Zelensky. They can fight. And someone wins and someone loses. Okay. Please look at who benefits the most. Is it Russia? Is it Ukraine? Or is it maybe the American military complex or something? Just look, because that will give you a lot of clues on how these things go about. So I fully agree with what you're saying.
So, which means if we want to talk conflict resolution as Africans, let's study the balance of forces. What's going on here? And do you know that enemies can close ranks just to oust you? So in this case, okay, here's a perfect narrative. Who manufactures the bullets? Who manufactures the guns? Surely it's not any of African. So that tells you who supplies the oil that runs those machines. Now, whoever supplies the military armor into a war zone is a culprit. So it means then we must understand why people are fighting. Let me say the very countries. I'm sharing these things. One, I'm a public management student, so I must give perspective. I'm allowed to give that. Two, if I have to make laws, I must make laws from a position of being informed. So I can't make a law without understanding the balance of forces there.
Yes.
Often than not, it's not us. These wars, as they continue going, is not about us. Let me give you an example. In the Francophone countries, do you know why they're fighting? They're fighting France, Macron, of the colonial tax that he keeps on charging on those countries for having built the infrastructure.
Yes.
I'm a public finance person. This is my narrative. If you are charging us colonial tax, what about the spoils that you took from our country? Are they not worth anything?
Yes.
Why are Africans still owing these former colonial masters even today? Yet they've taken more than, there is nothing left here. If you say us Africans are responsible for our downfall, okay, I take that in. But I can say the same with you, the colonial master, to say, you've taken a lot. Why are we still owing you? And what are we owing you for? In economics, they came with a wrong narrative that says you must keep your gold bars in a foreign country as a backup to strengthen, to defend your currency. Do you know what those gold bars do in London? They strengthen the pound. The pound never loses its power, irrespective that they are not involved in any of the mining activities. So, you know where we get hoodwinked? You can't keep your crown jewels in a foreign land because by so doing, it is recorded in economics that it is in their vault and reserves. So it strengthens their economy. They've got now what you call bankable balance sheet to finance. Our banks will lend money against the gold sitting in the reserve. Go to South African Reserve Bank and see if we've got gold remaining there.
You're taking your houses, you're taking your cash, you're putting it in my name, you're putting it in my bank account, and somehow that's meant to make you strong.
To make me say, what nonsense is that? I won't fall for that. So my point to you is that I'm learned. You don't insult my intelligence. And it is against this background that when you see my narrative as if it is radical because what you taught me is wrong. I can go as far as the African independence. Let me show you fault lines of the entire African independence from 1957 in Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana up until Mandela's time. Let me show you. In the same book, you must read that book, The Greatest Prime Minister of South Africa. It says, it is the International Banking Association that sat down just before the dawn of Africa's independence, where Ghana would become the first in 1957. They said, let's stage puppet regimes that will look like the Africans are independent, whereas they will be continuing with us micromanaging them to manage our affairs. They're not allowed to change anything, just take over the operations as they are. Foot steward. So Ghana, as they become independent in 1957, the thinking is that they are being free. But these guys who are independent presidents are coming from the colonial masters, all of them.
So usa right ngeti awushangeli?
Right.
Okay. But
yes.
we'll make.
So I'm showing what we thought. These are narratives now.
Yeah.
What is written in literature? You need to read across all literature to make a story. It turns out that it's not us who initiated the independence. It's not that we were successful. There was an All-Africa Conference in 1945.
Yeah.
And after that All-Africa Conference, the whites then met. As they meet the Banking Association, they said, okay, it's becoming a liability to keep these slaves here. Let us send them back home. But we send one of those who understand European culture to influence their own.
Yes.
Let it be them who influence their own people about foreign culture.
Correct.
So when you come there, you take over as president, you look good as if you're smart. 6 years later, he dies. Comic room. Who kills him? It's the same colonial masters who said he can become the first independent president. Let's go to DRC. Patrice Lumumba. His tooth is the only thing that survived after he was dipped in acid by the Belgians. They would chop the hands of the DRC natives to make chocolate. Best chocolate is coming from Belgium. And they would make a chocolate which is in the form of an arm. Like this. So when you see a chocolate like this, it is emulating the chopping of hands. Why the chopping of hands? Anyone who doesn't want to dig diamonds for the colonial master, we chop your hand. You must work for us. I went to Belgium. There's a settlement called Matonge, where they staff all the DRC people who were colonized by the Belgians. It's like Marabastad, where pigs die. It's a mess. They isolate minorities in Belgium as blacks to say, you stay here. Don't interfere with our mainstream community. They are called minorities in the Belgian laws. These are the people who dipped the whole body of Patrice Lumumba into acid. And a Belgian came up to say, here is the truth of Patrice Lumumba. You know, in dental technology, if you want to find the DNA of a person, the only thing that remains are the teeth. The teeth, out of the teeth, you can pick up your DNA. My sister is doing that technology, so I know. My point is, we thought DRC is becoming liberated. They take his partner to stage his killing by exposing him to the Belgians. Why? He was emerging as a voice of reason fighting for his people. Why I'm sharing these things? I'm sharing these things that sometimes we get locked into the struggle. In the process of a struggle, there are compromises and sacrifices, and the same martyrs of freedom get massacred.
I want to mention the name. Sorry, Lumumba was captured en route by state authorities under Joseph Desiré Mobutu.
Yes.
Sent to the state of Katanga with the help of Belgian partisans. Tortured and executed by the separatist Katangan authorities of Mose Chombe.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm showing these are independent presidents of these countries.
Where the countries are becoming independent.
So now I want you, the listener,
Mandela I'm not going to go out like these guys, but outing Spanish abelungu.
Exactly. I'm going
outing Spanish abelungu.
Now, those who call themselves Pan-Africanists, if you're a true Pan-Africanist, you die for it. Because if you are stubborn, you get killed.
No, true Pan-Africanists get killed. Yeah. Anyone who debates or disputes that is lying, if not to us, then to themselves.
Exactly.
Any true Pan-Africanist that people know out there who is still alive, but is vocal and you need to interrogate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do? You have to compromise a little in order to let live. So that at least you don't throw a child with bathwater. Let's come. South Africa commits a mistake in 1994 by taking political seat and leave the economy to the whites.
Before you speak about that, ngicela ukubilisela amanzi.
You can.
Ukuyosibilisela amanzi.
Yes, you can do that.
Just a few seconds. Ukushaya with the same.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, I want to mention all of them. So, in the 60s, okay, then there was OAU, Organization of African Unity.
Yeah.
Kwame Nkrumah dies. This is the reason why he died. He wrote a book called Neo-Colonialism. So as he becomes aware of what is happening now that he's president, he says, hang on. So he saw it late to say, hang on, we are actually here set up for failure. We are not supposed to change anything which the colonial master was having. Then he writes this book. As he writes this book, then he finds a way to implement some of the reforms in the economy in Ghana. Then he becomes a target.
I wanted to say this, sorry, while you're on this topic, some of the most radical, some of the most conscious, black conscious, some of the most progressive black children I know went to the most white schools and were raised in the most European backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And they had an awakening later. And when the awakening happens, they become extremely angry because they realize that someone lied to me somewhere along the line. It's not what I thought.
Now, how do you like it? It is even written down. It is said in one of the books, let's take the children of the kings to teach them Western education so that when they come back home, they are not talking the same thing with their fathers. So when I say to my child, this is your land, my child who studied in the US says, no, it's not your land, it's Mr. Oppenheimer's land, according to what book. They are full of understanding, but understanding a white man's rule, not their native rule.
Sure.
As a result, do you know that most of the literature got banned and destroyed, which would expose this truth? So in the 60s, Africa divided into two groups, the conservatives and the nationalists, who said, let's liberate the entire African continent, then we rule. Others said, let's take it bit by piece. Let's take political rule, and then the rest will follow. We got divided since then till today. We never agreed on the approach. Because the other had a vision to say, let me have the others to get free. So that together we become a unit. We never achieved that. Now, let's come to South Africa. And I want to talk about Robert Sobukwe deliberately. There is a white man who made a very nostalgic statement. He says it in 1967 in Salisbury in Rhodesia. He was a superintendent, saying to the fighters, to them, 13 years before Mugabe could achieve independence in Zimbabwe.
Salisbury, Rhodesia would be what we call Zimbabwe, or a part of Zimbabwe today.
Yes, today, yes.
Sure.
He says to the fighters, you guys are good fighters, but you'll never win anything. Because why? We, the white people, when we took your land, it was a virgin territory. And then we changed it completely into something else, the network of economy and businesses and industries. So when you say you are freedom fighters and you are here taking your land, we say, take it, here it is. But let's see if you can run all this operation.
Yeah.
He says, because us, he said it like that. He said, let me teach you something about us white people, is that there are certain knowledge and information which we'll never give to a black man. Check today, you don't even have an aeroplane which you can fly. It's a skill that we have kept exclusively to be our own.
Building a ship
and all of that. Then he says, we then integrated the entire global economy where no black man plays a role in there. So which means you can become a freedom fighter, but will never own anything which you would have won according to your philosophy of freedom fighting.
It's a beautiful quote that you're giving me now, and it's so deep for people to sit and meditate on. Mm-hmm. You are good fighters, you can defeat us, but we built certain infrastructure that we understand, and we ensured and will keep ensuring that you will never understand how to build it, how to run it and maintain it.
Yeah.
And then we built an international network where we exclude all black people from playing there, so that at no point can black people properly be able to build ships, trains, aeroplanes, and roads and bridges and the type of infrastructure that would be needed for you guys to be respected at the same level. You will always need us. We can give you all the land you want, but you will always need us to make it functional in the global economy.
So there's no democracy basically in the economy. It's take it or leave it. So those who talk democracy, when you ask me, do you love democracy or do you believe in it? I say that's relative. It depends on what is at stake. But what I've come to learn as someone who studies Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, Greek philosophers, is that it is a means to an end, but they also died without implementing those ideas 500 years ago. So for me, to be shoved those ideas to a black man is an insult to our intelligence. It's condescending. So I'm saying to us as Africans, all of us, here we are 30 years later in the so-called independence or liberation, but we have nothing to show. The colonial master remembers what they've done to our forebears. We are made not to remember anything that was done to us. You have a generation that knows what is happening now, and they don't know that it was taboo in the olden days. Okay, let me talk about Robert Sobukwe to show how correct he was.
You want to speak about him for a while? I just wanted to summarize the things you said before we continue, so that I don't have to go back.
Yeah.
I appreciate you telling us about the Oppenheimer empire. I found it interesting while I was looking at the word that the surname Oppenheimer, if you play around with the words empire, actually comes out from there. Very interesting.
That's why there's a book called South Africa Incorporated Oppenheimer Empire. It is the title of the book.
Play on words. You explained, and this is my understanding, that the reason you wouldn't join Anglo is because the agreement would have been broken and flawed from the get. They would have not stuck to anything.
They do it at their terms, not at your terms.
Sure, you'd never get it at your terms. They'd never see you as a partner. They'll change names.
When they are done with you, they chuck you out.
Sure.
And it's not me. I'm not the first one. In fact, it came as an advice to say, please don't. I'm coming from there.
Sure.
They keep you there isolated. They don't give you any task. And then sometime later, they come and say, what are you doing in our offices here? I don't see any workflow. What are you doing? You brought me here, and then you don't give me a job to do. I'm just a face. They know what they're doing. It's just a front.
That's the one part. The other part... This one is dangerous because I don't think you're going to give me an honest answer. But I'll tell you what I took from what you said. You'll decide if you want to answer this or just go to Robert Sobukwe.
Okay.
It sounded like you spoke about the British and maybe others infiltrating the Zulu nation and kingdom through the assassination of Ushaka, which would make me believe that every other king we've had since then, to some degree, is a colonial placement and manager, more than a real king that runs the land on behalf of the people. And because we've had to defend the land for so long, as Zulus at the very least, other tribes can also argue the same. We've never been able to then have a sit down on the strategy and the economy. But more than anything, the people that run and look after the trusts and are custodians of various pieces of land, even what we call countries, Eswatini, Lesotho and the likes, they are mostly, let's call them presidents, prime ministers, or ceremonial seats to serve global agendas more than the people.
I will answer that question because I came here. I have a copy for you. I will leave it with you.
Okay.
It's written down why we cannot lead proper.
Okay. You'll decide if you want to answer that or carry on to Sobukwe.
I will come to Robert Sobukwe. So let's talk about in 1885. There were two conventions. There was one in Pretoria and another one in London.
Okay. Is that fine?
It's fine, yeah.
We're on two conferences.
Two conferences, the Pretoria and the London Convention in
1885. Where are your cups? They're there by the castle. Officially for the audience, man, I need to apologize, Zwelakhe Mthethwa. Just for the audience, guys, we're working on a skeleton staff. I'm not trying to disrespect my guest. I know some people might feel like that. I'm not taking liberties because we're working on a skeleton staff, and luckily abantu bayangena manje. So if you feel like the moving up and down was disrespectful, ngiyaxolisa from my side, but it was not my intention, and it's something that we'll resolve moving forward. And to you, putting ngiyaxolisa kakhulu.
No problem.
Please feel free to continue the two conferences.
I was saying, I want to prove why we cannot govern. You can't perfect somebody else's intellectual property. If you want to rule, you must rule according to your own rules and your system. Now, according to Professor Henry Clark in the US, he died in 2011. He wrote a history of Africa. He's an African American. He says, King Jobe was a governor. King Tingswayo was a governor. King Shaka was a governor. He's giving us modern day context of a governing system, but using a primitive African native system.
John Henry Clark.
John Henry Clark, yes. Now, that brings me to say, as I've studied public management, it is in the genes of my forebears whom today's scholars regard them as governors. So for the
Thank you so much,
colonial masters, if they think Africans cannot govern, here is a scholar
Thank you
of
very
note,
much, sir.
par excellence. He labels African kings as governors, the manner in which they rule, they ran the country. Yeah. He controlled the trade route in Delcoa Bay, Mozambique. He would not allow the whites to enter the land. You would meet and exchange goods and services at the port because this is your turf. He had military regiment, that is King Tingswayo. Now, I'm showing that we do have the genes to govern, but there is a problem when you impose a system of government which is foreign to those natives. Then you are setting them up for failure. So the colonial masters, they say we are failing to govern a country, but how do we fail when you are imposing Roman, Dutch, and British law? This land was never packaged according to Roman, Dutch, and British law. These kings we're talking about, they never interpreted Roman, Dutch, and British law. It was irrelevant at the time. So you are using your own system, you're imposing it on an African, and you say, let's see if you can make it. Yes, it's a setup for failure. In my genes lies a blood of those who ruled this country in their kingdom system. Today, when I study the books, that system is no longer allowed to be the author of the day. Now, in that 1885 record, which I have for you, it is written, a white man is going to become the president of the country. Then the local chief is going to become a subject of a white man. And the white man will use a system of deposing any radical king that does not want to subject themselves under the British or Dutch rule. And then impose the one who is not rightful, so as to when they don't want to take orders and instruction, we remove them from the position because they are not legitimate in any way. So my point, that statement, as far as 1895, till today, 2025, is still being used.
Oppenheimer futhi ekhona la engathi terrorizer.
So
I hope it won't distract us.
I know. So why am I raising that part? That is my issue as a public manager. You expect us to run this country optimally well when we can't use our own native systems. You must understand, when you make a law, it becomes a culture. And that culture becomes the heritage. But the question, whose heritage am I living? White man's heritage or a black man's heritage? In my thinking, I think...
Zwelakhe, can you hear this fly? Can we try and get rid of it? Sorry, sir.
Yes.
Hey, ngathi siyathekwa fethu ama British ne Berlin conference nako konke at the same time. Khona moya ongekho right kumele angasuhlinzele something there. Ongathi awufuni sifundisa abantu fethu the things.
It is dangerous.
Nyambos, I'm so sorry.
People. Yeah. So,
whose heritage? Because it is not ours.
Heritage is not ours.
And you're saying the law becomes culture.
When I make a law, when a king speaks, it becomes law. And whatever he spoke becomes a heritage. I will prove it after this. Becomes a culture. That culture will become the heritage. Once it comes to a stage of being a heritage, which means every now and then we'll be doing that thing because it is now intertwined with our system.
Correct.
How do you expect me to run a business when you don't allow me to run it in isiZulu? I'm a China, a Newcastle, Lapima Femin.
Yes.
Their computers are written in Chinese.
Yes.
So you can't decode anything they've written there. If you want to steal intelligence, you can't.
The Taiwanese.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what does that say to you? We were made to look down upon our own practices as if they are wrong.
Yes.
It turns out when you travel the world, Putin speaks Russia. He decoded everything according to his native language. It is a bonus when he speaks your English for you, but he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
The same way, why are we made to love English and Afrikaans, but we cannot converse in isiZulu, even in business? As if uma usukhuluma isiZulu, you cannot be a business wise person.
Yes.
But check our forebears. They were perfect. Look at the men who fought defending this land. They had this day in mind. A time will come where their generation will have no land. I've already given you figures. By 1913, the one we are using in our constitution as a reference for legally running this country is a wrong reference. It says me. I'm a public law student. I've checked this. On that day which you passed the Land Act of Herzog Bill was the day when we were reduced to 14%, if not 13% of land as the majority. Then the minority took the entire 84 or whatever percentage of land for production, for settlement, for commerce. And then we are squashed through a law is passed and is given a label called Force Removal Act. You have Miscegenation Act where you don't allow different race to marry. You have Job Preservation Act which allowed certain jobs not to be taken by blacks. You have Group Areas Act which allowed racial classification of settlements where this land is only for whites, this land is only for blacks. And these are all laws. What nonsense is this? We are coming from a communal setup where we used to live together. And we even invited a stranger to live amongst us. Let me prove something which most of us don't realize. Because they're getting their wires crossed about their private property ownership. In KwaZulu, we use a kingdom system where the land belongs to the king.
Yes.
Right? At which point did we practice Private Property Act when the entire land is a national asset? So it's a lie that they're advancing to say our kings gave the whites the land. The giving of land is that practice which we still practice today, which is called ukukhonza, which means the land is left for generation. You can go, but we can settle somebody else in that land. We're doing this for generations.
Permission to occupy, Baba.
It was a permission to occupy. They misconstrue it for private property ownership. Now they are sitting with these treaties. They are showing us to say the king gave us land. Yes, he gave you land. Where him as the king will become the authority, not you. Not that you come and put your fence in the land and say, this is now my private property. Yes, you can put up a fence, but the cackles and the land is a national asset. Why are we doing that? Procreation purposes. Now we have a mess. The population is growing. Where you squashed us, the land is not expanding. You've taken ownership of everything. Only your own can grow. Only your own can clinch new properties for commercial gains. No black is allowed to do that. So there's a clash of laws into running the country. But somebody feels we can't change these laws. So whose dispensation is this? Is it for minority or majority? I can tell by the benefits. Since 1994, do you know that the whites have benefited more financially than the blacks? During the rule of the blacks. Let me demystify the lie that we are running the country. We are not running the country. The whites are running the country. So it means we are still being run by a minority under pretense of a majority rule. There's no such. In last year is worse. We formed a new term of majority rule where losers collude to form a majority of losers. That's what we did. So, and that undermines then the principle of majority rule, because here is 37 vote in one block. But an assembly of 15%, 17%, 19% to form a bigger whole, and you call that majority. But let me move on by saying, until we decode these laws according to our native languages and cultures, we'll never optimally run anything economical. So that's why the clash between the black and white in South Africa is that the white want the preservation of their own, but when they took over, they destroyed anything of ours.
Decolonization is what you speak about. I've got notes, but I'm not going to go through them. I don't know if we can go for another 30 minutes.
Yes, sir.
See with tips. Will you be able to give short answers? I know it's a big ask.
I can give, as long as people will not misconstrue it for something else.
So
people
we'll add a disclaimer.
Of course. Yes. So there might be a qualification, because people, they tend to take what you said and interpret it.
Of course.
In law, we have interpretation of statutes. So you mustn't leave things to multiple interpretations. Otherwise, you'll lose the case.
So in the last 30 minutes, I go through these questions I had. I'm not going to go through my notes. We didn't get a chance to speak about Robert Sobukwe and the two conferences.
Oh, yes.
As well. And I apologize for that.
But let's just sneak it in. Is it possible?
In 3 minutes?
In 3 minutes, yeah.
No problem.
But what I wanted to show there about Robert Sobukwe, the mandate of the ruling party then, because there's no more ruling party now. You have a bigger party, bigger than the other, but it's not a 51% majority.
A majority of losers, we call them.
Yeah, and collude, and then they form a majority, which is a new term under public management, which we must coin it. But in 1912, kings and pastors formed ANC, National Native Congress, because the white men have taken over at Union Building to build Union Buildings to rule the country from there, to rule the kings. Then they started a mandate of saying, let us fight for land to come back. In 1994, Mandela says, one man, one vote. But this one man, one vote does not bring back the land. It's just to vote, and then the status quo, the terms of engagement in CODESA are implemented. Robert Sobukwe decided to walk away to form PAC in 1959. The reason is that because they are now allowing other racial groups who were not fighting for land, but for coexistence with the blacks. And then they formed Freedom Charter. Part of the terms of Freedom Charter said the wealth of the country shall be shared by all those who live in it. But the Freedom Charter as a document is not a legislated document which white people were implementing in their rulership. Come 1994, a Freedom Charter could not be still implemented even when a black man is a president. Why? Because the terms of engagement in CODESA were against the terms of Freedom Charter in 1955.
I just want to say this because most black people don't know that the Freedom Charter wasn't originally written by black people.
Exactly.
Matthews,
yes.
I don't know who Matthews is. I don't know if it's Matthews Paus, I'm not sure. Lionel Rusty Bernstein, that's a Jewish surname. Ethel Truss, Ruth First.
Yes.
Alan Lipman.
Yes.
Whose wife, Beata Lipman, handwrote the original charter. These are Jewish people. The charter was officially adopted on Sunday, the 26th of June, 1955, at the gathering of about 3,000 people, known as the Congress of the People in Kliptown in Soweto. I just want black people, because they don't know. Standard reference Freedom Charter. It was not written by black people.
Black people were rubber stamping what was written by them. I will prove my case.
Lionel Rusty Bernstein, I think, is the main author. Sure.
Come 94, we were no longer talking the terms of Freedom Charter. 2, how come the Ruperts and the Oppenheimers controlled the economy of the country alone, but the Freedom Charter said the wealth of the country shall be shared by all those who live in it? White people don't want us to share the wealth. So who wrote that? And then the expose of Rupert. Okay. Take South Africa Incorporated, Oppenheimers MK. How did we end up having that book? Because that book tells us this economy is for these men. But we say Freedom Charter said the world shall be shared by all those who live in it. Here we are, we don't share that. And who must legislate that? And who must watch that we implement that? These are outfits, these are narratives we get told, which amounts to nothing. 30 years later, we don't have economy, but there's a man who has it. What does that say? So my point is, by 67, it was already clear. How many years from walking away from ANC to form a PAC? PAC says land first, which means ANC lost the plot on land. And then PAC said land first, everything else will follow. It turns out 30 years later from 94, we still don't have the land, which means Robert Sobukwe was right. Exactly. Why will we fight for land? Because somebody may say you don't know what to do with it. In business economics, 4 factors of production is land, buildings, owner's equity, and labor. If you don't own these 4 factors, you cannot be part of the economy. And if the majority of people of this country don't have land, which means they cannot be part of the economy. And if white people continue to want to own every property as they are fighting against the expropriation bill, it is because they don't want to lose their interest, because it's good for their business to control those factors of production, and blacks don't understand that. So it's not that we are warmongers when you fight for land. It's because I'm speaking from a business economics perspective. So if you don't understand economics, then you're missing the point. And in the Constitution, they don't mention land. They only stick to property. Go to the Section 25 section. Land is not property and property is not land. In law, you must interpret both. In economics, land, buildings. Why in economics we have land and buildings, but in the Constitution you only say property? So it's limited interpretation. So we misconstrue. When I'm fighting for land, you say, no, it says property as if it's land. And when I fight for property, you say, no, it's not property, it's about land.
I'll just 30 minutes. Again, anyone who's going to be watching this, sit down. When you see the clips out there on social media of people misconstruing, you have an obligation to let people know, please go watch the full interview. Because they added a disclaimer that in the interest of time, there are certain things that won't be touched on, but please read this with understanding and with the context that you gave prior, and with the understanding of where Zwelakhe Mthethwa comes from and what he's trying to achieve on behalf of Africans in South Africa in the context of history. So don't let people misconstrue whatever answer he gives now. I'm going to try and go through these questions. Number 1, who does South African land belong to? Is it true that kings and chiefs own about 14% of South African land under over 200 trusts? And is it true that the state owns over 14% of land? But most important, who does South African land belong to?
Currently in South Africa, land is packaged according to our trust. So the white people, they came up with the Trust Act. The aim of the Trust Act was to hide land and properties. So you must go to deeds office and check who owns which trust. In that trust, you'll find land. So anything else that says anything else outside what is written at deeds office is not relevant. Which means I've given you a direction. Go to this office. And there when you'll find Kukemore and Sons, Fantoner and Sons, and Aldai Salkadan.
You know, when you look at the land audit, which I think they've only done one, it was as comprehensive as it could be, but not the greatest, and it's our reference point now. When they get to trusts, they don't break down who owns the trusts. They'll say trusts, they'll say companies.
Exactly.
Then they'll speak about the farms. Nakona, they work on surnames, of which 72% of farms are owned by white people. I think 3% by black.
Yeah.
Then they speak about residential property.
And when you say black, you must put a qualification that's where they put a cluster. Is black, which means the whole location that trust at least. But in the case of white, individuals would own vast tracts. But in our case, owned by blacks.
So you're saying the current answer of who does the land belong to is based on the deeds registry?
The deeds registry will give you the latest, because any other information which is not coming from deeds, it may be misleading.
Okay. So outside of the official, formal, technical answer, the philosophical answer, the spiritual answer, who does the land belong to? Who would you say South Africa or this part of the African continent belongs to, if you were to explain it from an idealistic perspective?
We used the governing system of kingdoms where we lived for one another. There was a practice which I still want us to go and read about it. Inkosi would now go and stay there. So the comparison is that a king, even now, you can go. We are the ones who are still settling people, giving people land. Do you know Gutama middle class are now coming to the land of Amakosi to build stories or high stories? Why? That's the only land that is available. So KwaZulu is being hated because he's taking business out of those who control properties. Because the middle class is now going rural, community-wise. Because they are being shaved their head by property gurus.
Yeah.
So ownership of land, it is for procreation and it's for future generation, which we can pass on. But namhlanje otherwise they are passing on to their own kin and kind, but not to blacks. And they block by all laws that no law must allow land to be redistributed according to demographic racial classification.
Should land belong to kings, queens, who are custodians on behalf of people that need the land? Not so much belongs to those who live in it, belongs to those who work it, but belongs to the kings who are meant to serve the interests of the people and ensure that people have land.
You need stability. The only thing that we had at that time was posterity succession within our kingship system.
Yeah.
When they brought their own system, it is now private proprietorship where individuals will own all of us. That is nonsense.
Okay. Do you know if it's true that the kings and queens control about 14% of South African land and that the state as well, which is roughly 28 to 30% of total South African land?
According to 1994, only KwaZulu-Natal has 2.8 million hectares of land. All the other kings, their land is held by the state, which means according to law, they are viewed as minors. Because in law, when your matters are handled by a legal representative, which means you are a minor. So we were all reduced into minors where our land is held by the state. So it's not true that those queens are owning it. We have them. They don't own it. They are still crying that their land must come back to them.
Do you believe that CODESA, as a negotiated settlement, should be null and void because the traditional leaders were excluded?
I say that it's me who's standing for that.
Should we have a sit down and say we want to have a completely new conversation with whoever role players we deem are worthy to say, we understand CODESA happened. We understand we are living through the terms of reference of CODESA. But we want a completely new conversation because that one excluded the owners of the land.
And I can give you more other reasons. They put suspensive clauses that says non-negotiable. So which means those discussions were malafide, were not in good faith.
Not in good faith.
Yeah.
That's CODESA.
That's CODESA. For me, I say it, you can quote me. I'm a public law student. I know what happened. They said, we won't negotiate economy, won't negotiate property, won't negotiate this. We can negotiate a political settlement.
This is not in the questions I sent you, but off the top of your head, who would you want sitting at this new conversation?
What we need to do when we go to a negotiation table, cluster yourself, group yourself according to demographic. Let's use demographic representation. I'm a public manager, so I know my community. So what you do, I don't want anyone to be left behind.
Okay.
So give me racial classification and give me percentages according to the racial groups. Then get to what we call special groups. Special groups, you'll have abantu who are living with disability. You have homeless children, representation, all those groups. So that we mustn't have a sector in a society that says we were excluded as a result because we needed a different kind. Like people living with disability.
Yes.
When we do planning, we forget them. They need the ramps when they get into buildings. But we build buildings with stairs, and they can't. The cars that we use, they don't accommodate people who are using wheelchair.
Yes.
So then, in a discussion table, make sure the special groups are represented, just so that their interests are not forgotten.
Would when they sit at this table, would their weight in their voice be based on how big their group is? Or would it be a factor of things like maybe economics? So the Oppenheimers come to the table. I think it's Jonathan who's going to take over from his dad, Nicky, now. When he comes to the table with whatever community he's coming with, does he have a voice based on white people? I don't think they recognize themselves as Jewish anymore. But or would the fact that they also own a lot of wealth also amplify their voice? Or what criteria would be used to say, we are disabled, and you're like, okay, there's 10% of you. We are white, but there's 8-9% of you.
We must look at, if we want peace, look at me as a human being. But the moment you have statements like in that 1885 document to say blacks are barbaric and they're ignorant and they're busy with their cultures, that is insult.
Yes.
And it comes from whites. So we don't want it. So we want, first, let's look at each other as human beings. And don't come with your status because your status was acquired through illegitimate means.
Okay. So illegitimate statuses are left out the door.
Left out the door.
Okay.
That I will prove my case. In 1978, in the United Nations, I went there in UNESCO in 2005. It is written, apartheid was discussed in UN as a crime against humanity. So when whites are saying they must be paid for the infrastructure that they have built, the question is, do you want ill-gotten crime spoils?
Sure.
Is that what you are saying? If you got this thing through illegitimate means by marginalizing others and killing others, and then now you say you must be paid for that.
I want to ask a very mischievous question, and I apologize. Ill-gotten status should be null and void at what will be CODESA 2.0. Would the same apply to what we call kings and queens and chiefs today? Because they may be illegitimate leaders. And how would we distinguish who should be the traditional leadership representation?
What we must have a consensus understanding. What is not defined? Let me talk about Ngonyama Trust Act, the manner in which things are. We must take it a step further. You have a master trust that holds the title deed of the land. Under that master trust, you will have 15 sub-trusts that are according to sectoral determination in a community. And that becomes a government. So it means you just have a custodian that looks after, it can be elders. Let's have a council of elders in our society or community.
Yes.
The reason there is just for posterity.
Okay.
When they die, let's have others. The same system they use in estates, in the estate.
Yes.
Use that for ourselves as a country, which means let become a government. And then make sure that there's posterity in whatever we're ruling. We agree. So we must be represented. Let's decide on a system. I'm not throwing away democracy. That's why this is where democracy comes into play now, because we must look at numbers. It is unfair to have people who are 80% out of 62 million in South Africa are controlled by someone who's 8%. That's what's happening now.
Correct.
So for that, let's disaggregate then the numbers. Let's use racial classification according to statistics. Why do you keep statistics if you cannot use it to make decisions based on that? The whites, they understand the language of statistics, but they don't use it in the case of population beneficiation.
Yes.
They're using it as selfish means to say, this is all mine. Hier is ons tweede vaderland. Doesn't make like that.
Thank you so much. Okay. Do you believe we should remove the borders? And if yes, how do you think the southern region of Africa should look like? Obviously, if you think no, then it remains the same. But if we were to remove the borders, because they are colonial, we didn't decide to set them up, what would you want at least the SADC, what we call the SADC area, to look like?
Depends on what okay, I can talk better about that subject because I am directly affected by that. We have Mthethwas in Lesotho. Mthethwas trapped in Mozambique. in Zimbabwe, Botswana, Malawi, Tanzania, DRC. They can't come.
Eswatini.
Yes. They can't come to Empangeni where King Tingswayo ruled. Why? Because they are regarded as non-South Africans.
Foreigners.
They are foreigners. So what we did, we then established what is called Mthethwa Clan International. Where we connect with all of them. So we exist now. So exactly, we are now prevented by the border system to say they can't come here permanently. They must come on certain terms. But I'm not fixated with that. If we can then have a recognition to say these are Mthethwas who were closed outside the country due to border system, which is colonial. So literally, you've got Mthethwas who are speaking Portuguese.
Yeah.
And now, it's a crime against humanity committed by somebody who was selfish.
Broken families apart.
Broken families. So my outlook, there are those who don't know, even if you don't know that you've got Mlochwas in the other countries. So your decision must be informed by the fact that you are likely going to have your own people. In 1823, the Mfecane and the Bapakane process, the migration of the natives from here, fled into the SADC region. So there has to be justice at some point to say, even if you don't allow us, but have access to your own kind if you need them. And this rigorous system is what is actually failing us. But then the issues of interest get clouded by issues of kin and kindred. Because for me, as Mthethwa, it's a matter of connecting with my own.
Yeah.
But to Oppenheimer, it's about somebody's coming to plunder their gains they've made. And as a result, they look at them as foreigner. I say, is Mthethwa. I know I've got a group of Basutus who have got a group. They call themselves Nyambo, Masondo, and so on. Tingswayos. They are speaking Sesotho. I discovered them.
The borders must be removed. But we must reimagine what...
We then must reconfigure how then do we move from here. Which means when you remove the borders, you must also restore some of the institutions like your kingdoms. Because that's the reason why you want to open them.
Sure.
Is that Kune Kingdom in Mapungubwe.
Yes.
In Mapungubwe, this was a great civilization, which were trading in gold and in beads, but it's on the border of South Africa and Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And that border says now, whatever is this side is this side, whatever is this side. And it leads to conflict.
Sure.
In the same way, in Mozambique, Utembe, we've got the Tembes right on the border. They are this side, and the others who are that side. During the xenophobic attack, I read an article of a Tingswayo who was Mozambican, who was also persecuted. And the fact that they were in Durban is because they were trying to connect with the Mthethwas in Empangeni. But they had to be fled back because they say, we're Mozambican, because of they fled during those times.
Yeah.
And they can come back. So this debate, when we do it, Oppenheimer put up these borders for his own interests. But he is the one who controls them, by the way. And because he controls the state as well. So in our case, you must talk to kingdoms. There's a different reason why they would need those borders to be removed. But also we must then have an alternative substitution. What then replaces what used to be borders? Because you've got key issues of language.
Yes.
You've got issues of culture. There's so many issues. Those who are in Mozambique, they are leaning towards Portuguese practice. Those who are in Zimbabwe, they are leaning towards British practice. So on and so on. So you will have a clash of culture. We can maybe say have a ceremonial meeting. For now, we just need to connect. Connection.
Yeah.
The other details, the next generation will figure out.
I just want to add this point on what you're saying, because this one becomes one of the major issues when people speak about borders, the ones that have good intentions. We need to have one. This is something that can be resolved just with political will. We need to have one documentation system across SADC, where it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. Your fingerprints are captured in whichever country you're in. your ID number, maybe facial recognition. And in any other country, when they can't find your passport, your what, you should be able to get fingerprints, facial recognition, and it should pick up where you're from.
And let me add, if we're attached to these borders, not long ago, they were not there.
Yeah.
We would virtually move and be in Swaziland, virtually move into Zimbabwe. But today, we talk as if this thing is permanent and it was fixed. It was not there before.
It wasn't there.
And when you go to Europe, when you get to Maasmechelen in Belgium, you just cross over a street, you are in touch. You can literally ride a bicycle from Belgium, which is one country, to Dutch.
Into the Netherlands.
And that's how. So it means in Europe, the borders are open. So anyone who has a problem with that, they must then tell us what is their thinking coming from, because in the so-called developed world,
yes,
it's open.
In your opinion, these are deep questions, man. Were Bantustans a bad idea? And do you think we're better off without them? Because some people argue that there was a lot of development happening under separate development, where you knew there's KwaZulu, there's Bophuthatswana, there's the Transkei, the Ciskei, Venda, where there was development happening. And there's an argument, a theory that part of the issue was to counter this development, we needed a united South Africa, remove those borders so that the monopolists, the capitalists would be able to make money everywhere without those spaces being able to develop on their own.
The Bantustan system was designed out of a Verwoed system, which he initiated apart development. He says every tribe must stay on their own because they want to justify Afrikaners having Orania.
Of course. The Orange Free State and the Transvaal, where there are two spaces.
Exactly. So now, Bantustan, depending on how much information you have, in KwaZulu, Amafem, they were built in Newcastle, Emanden, Ladysmith, which would be the economic hubs. In the interior of Zululand, people would move as labor to work in Newcastle, to work in Ladysmith, work in Manden. So it was about ring-fencing the richest spot of the country for the whites. And because blacks are a package, where you call it Bantustan, it is selectively, carefully chosen lands with rocks and thorns, where there's nothing can grow there, where no economy can grow there. So we were a labor for the industries that whites had built.
Sure.
So when you say it's better, somebody's comparing at least what is happening now.
Yeah.
What they don't know is that we were robbed in 94. That's what I can say. That's why that narrative, it comes from to say, kungcono lokhuya, rather than this nonsense.
Maybe part of that question would be, do you think separate development would help us as a nation to grow faster? Thina sobabili sibuyele eNyukhasela or in KZN, siyosebenza khona kunoma si-enrich eGoli or Cape Town, etc. Do you think separate development helps speed up development?
What you'll struggle there in terms of economic endowment or natural endowment. Other areas don't have certain things. So provided, if you do separate development, you must put a qualification that says, whatever you don't have in your locality, you can trade with your neighbors who have it in abundance.
Yes.
If the understanding is that, then whatever system you use, it's just a means to an end.
Okay.
But be aware that Kuninda, which may not have anything, but we have a perfect example. You're in Japan. They've got a small piece of land, but a lot of innovation comes from there, flooding the whole world. What does it say? You can be innovative with whatever that you do. So let's not be attached to outfits, but let's look at the end game.
Beautiful. Why currently do the kings collect money and benefits from government instead of setting up their own tax collection agencies and governments? Look, this might be answered by what you said earlier about that. A lot of them, we'd argue, are faces for certain systems that benefit. And I'm guessing this would be the reason why they did not push for, let's say, separate development. I'm a king. This is my kingdom. I want to set up my own tax. I don't want to keep begging government.
Let me answer. I'm a local government person, so I know. In 94, Amakos were not part of the meeting, so they're not privy to what they could do. Now, what happened? The practice of collection of tax, we were doing it. Wakuthiwa uthela enkosini. You would, when you've planted certain harvest, you take a portion, like a certain 10%.
Sure.
Or a tithe.
It's tithing, basically,
It's
to the
tithing
king. Yeah.
into the king. What do you do by so doing? Let me show you the beauty of that. Enkosini, that's where you report all your affairs. You have child-headed families, you've got orphans, you've got people living with disability, you've got widows. You've got families that don't have able-bodied people who can do things on their own. So when Ulet Enkosini, the understanding was to pile up silos. In silos, then abantu abahluphekile usiko lokunana to request a support. Support, that's the right way. Support and coexistence, helping each other, borrowing. That practice, we used it. We would give you a cow, a female one, which will gain milk, you put in cans, and then it ferments into mass. You've got stable food for the day for your kids. When you have taken good care of these cattle, when they have procreated, you can then return a percentage of what you were given for the next ones to be given. Today, Sector in African, we were doing it at home.
Social welfare.
It's social welfare, but it's not been put in the economics books as if now it's an intelligence of whites.
I hear you. Okay.
So Amakose didn't want the local government system. To answer your question, they said, because we are at a local sphere of governing the people, let us be the ones who regulate that space of local government. They didn't want. Why? Because they've got Amadolopa have white settlement. So if Amakose will be part of the CODESA talks and in advance this narrative, the whites will lose all the properties which they have made to be a white settlement.
Should we embrace?
So it was calculated not to invite kings in a CODESA meeting.
Should we embrace the current cultural groups as recognized, I think, by the colonialists? Zulu, Xhosa, Ndebele, Sotho, Tswana, Sepedi, Chivenda, Chitsonga, I'm not sure who I'm forgetting, Swati, etc. Or should we restructure the groups? Perhaps give Mthethwa back their power and their land. I'm surprised that the Mthethwas are not the leading nation, KwaZulu, especially with the power of Udingiswayo, who actually groomed Ushaka. Should we dismantle, for example, the Xhosa groups? Because someone will tell you that, yes, there was Uyinza, but there were Omfengu or Ompondomise and the likes. Should we embrace the current cultural groups, or should we be looking to dismantle them in the spirit of progress, land, economy, etc.?
I would support whatever you want to do, provided bring the intelligence first. At least teach, as I'm doing now, teach the people that part of the colonial strategy was cultural interference. There is a term in Afrikaans called toenaderings. That term was used for colored community to associate toenaderings, coming together of two racial groups, colored and Afrikaners, because of the language. They share Afrikaans as a language. But check the intentions. The intentions was to elevate a colored to be closer to a white man, but to be far away from the Bantus. Yet, a product of a colored is a direct result of a Bantu and white, sometimes. Now, then it was used against each other. It was part of the colonial strategy to say, let's separate the tribes according to their language, Francois, to advance a particular end. So for me, if you want to dismantle, give us a benefit of intelligence. What were they doing with that classification? Because it achieved certain ends, which was colonial. So don't just dismantle. There are good things that you can keep, and there are those that you can go back. I'm moving for I'm qualified in public management, but I'm strongly advancing the restoration of our kingdoms. I'm not doing that out of an academic perspective. I'm doing it because my people from Zimbabwe, Swaziland, and Mozambique have come back. I've met them. They say, Mthethwa, we need to come back home, where we used to call home. What can we do? We are blocked by borders. And we can't stay in South Africa because we don't have an identification.
Why have the kings failed to build schools and economies, specifically in local languages and cultures?
During their reign, they've done everything they could, but after the white settlers, they were subject of a white man's rule. That refer to the 1885 record I've given you.
That's why they haven't built these things today.
They were not even allowed. The economy is labeled as a white man property. A king was reduced into a boy during a white settler time. But in the era of Ding Soe was never. He lived at a time where he saw the first white man, Dr. Konvo, was riding a horse with a gun. So that white man didn't actually take over the Mthethwa kingdom. So we ruled on our own. We had our own production. You can imagine how much production of food, livestock that is being kept, the soldiers that were fighting. You had more than 500 military regiments. The regimental system was perfected by him. From early age, children will be babutwa leli gama. Amabutho comes from ubutwa, the art of putting together age groupings for purposes of doing national duty.
I wanted to add
so in our time, we've done what you are asking. Since the white man came, he said everything we enjoyed is for him.
I want to add a mischievous question before my last question. Your thoughts on assimilation? Because we're speaking decolonization and trying to using Sankofa to go and fetch things that worked in the past for modern. Should we not be assimilating to whiteness? Maybe having children with white people? When people speak of white supremacy and white systems, we'll say, no, we have embraced them as our own. You and I are speaking English as an example to advance ourselves, not to destroy ourselves. Should we not be assimilating to whiteness versus trying to find back our African ways, especially in a global world that looks the way it looks? Because we can go back to some of our ways, but they may keep us inferior in a global world that is very hostile to African ways of living.
As long as you don't force it on us. You don't force that I must take a white woman.
Okay.
It must be my choice.
Okay.
And we, the observers, will embrace your action and your decision. But when it is coerced, that you must do it. 2, as long as the white race says Africans are shithole countries.
I was Trump.
What do you expect? That thing of us going back to our own, it is informed by the rejection and the pushback by our white race, looking at us as barbaric and animals.
Yes.
They've reduced us into animals. That's why we want to go back to our
They're hostile.
home. They're hostile.
They're hostile.
So, but provided everything is equal, they no longer do those racial slurs. They no longer do lynching in America where they lynch by hanging black people. When they can stop all that nonsense and these utterances, it will happen naturally. You don't have to force it. I will look at them and embrace them. Our culture, we have always done that. That's how whites came to stay with us.
Yes.
But they had ill intentions. The moment they were with us, they started imploding the Zulu kingdom. In 1830, they started invading till today.
One of the nice things that you said in today's talk, and it's something we maybe don't speak about enough, but it made me wonder who is going to be the last person to pass on. And I apologize using it in this context. Who's going to be the last political leader to pass on who was part of that old school? Because we need fresh blood and we're still being beholden by some of them because
True.
because we need new blood, and so that when we do negotiate and speak, we'll say we weren't there. No one here was there. Even on your side.
I'm sharing this information because today they bar most of our generation from this information. So I'm sharing it to exactly initiate those talks, to say, can we now talk from a position of objectivity as opposed to being hoodwinked?
Yes.
And that is going to happen. It's a given. Once this conversation gets circulated, it will open up their thinking capacity and begin to embrace engaging on these succession issues. Wherein now I can tell you, Pan-Africanism, as we know it and as we are activists about it, was a lie against the colonial master versus us. They sold us what we wanted to hear. And they took some of us to say, advance this narrative. Turns out that narrative is not working. Mandela was a hero to us. It turns out he was not a hero, given where we are standing today. He was protecting the white people.
My last question to you. Why did you join Umkhonto weSizwe? And what's your personal objective within Umkhonto weSizwe, especially now that you are a distinguished member of parliament?
I joined it because I made a pledge that I will wait 20 years before I join government and politics as a fundi in public management. Why? 20 years is a change of a vision in a generation. So at that time, every vision in 20 years changes. So I was calculating from 99. I said, let me wait so that there's a generation that will phase out. But by the time the 20 years come, we are now 24 years. In 24 years, yes, it was a long wait. But I discovered there was a problem with the land issue, which was compromised. There was a problem with the laws. We keep the same laws that affected us. Then I said, I'm joining this one because I want to change it. And I've got information over 24 years. And no one is going to hold it against me because I never joined anyone. So you can't claim me coming from any political persuasion. I compromised and sacrificed to be here. So MK was a good vehicle. In fact, Babu Zuma came to me. I hosted a meeting of kings. I showed him where we made a mistake as a country during his term of office as president, to say there was a judgment which allowed you to return the land to blacks, and you were not advised to announce that even when there's a judgment in court of City of Pretoria belonging to Amandebel, which they won that case. It is gazetted, but nobody talks about it. And it was during Zuma's time.
What's the context of that case?
Victor Velapilikuleni versus the state. They won the City of Pretoria. They claimed it as their land.
Today? The City of Pretoria belongs to the Ndebele people?
The Ndebele people, yes.
Have they claimed the land? Is it something that other people should...
They did everything by the book, and the man even died.
But they still don't have the land?
The government doesn't want to give it because that's why the land claim process does not want to be finished, because you are going to now take the whole capital city, which government says it's the capital city for the country, and now it belongs to a black man. The problem is that it's a black man. But if it was a white man, if it was Rupert, they will gladly give him. But if it was a black man, and the law at play is a white man's law, but a black man won in a white man's law, that's the problem.
I don't know if you have any closing words.
Closing words, I would like to say to South Africa, let us push back the 1913... I don't know where they are. They show me where they are. They are there. So I am saying, in our constitution is limited by using 1913 as a reference. So let's push back. When we want to change the status quo, we must go as far back as the time when Jan van Riebeeck came. 1652. And then change the law, use native law, don't use a foreign law in a foreign land. You will win economy, you will win a good welfare for everyone. The clash comes on the culture of this law. It is foreign and imposed on us. We'll never succeed.
Dignity.
Exactly.
Umpano wase-6 sebetha moya.
Yes.
Emadadeni eNewcastle.
Yes.
Nyambose Dingiswayo. Magaga uNtsibantsiba. Thank you so much for joining us. My father's namesake Zwelakhe. A stark reminder of how the majority of our people still don't understand the depth of the land, of the nation. and this important work we're doing, because this is part of the work. People may not see it, but the decolonization lies in the conversations, in the education, in the sharing of history, in the sharing of ideas. And many white people don't understand, and I try to get them to understand that decolonization will benefit all of us, including them.
Exactly.
Afrikaners, by the way, who have a very bad history in this country, become one of the European groups that embraced being African, call themselves Afrikaners. They have a big role to play. They'd already done a good job in moving us away from the British in some of the industrialization. We need them to help us. We need them to work with us. I'd like to think, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say this, I'm going to say it, that Afrikaners are one of the cultural groups in this country. They are a tribe, along with the Zulus and the Xhosas, because they are not a tribe anywhere else but here. So they need to work with us to move us away from British rule. We are not British anymore, so that we can become a sovereign nation, whether it is South Africa or the southern region of Africa, so that we can advance. And umsebenzi wakho bhuti uyancomeka kakhulu, and I appreciate you very much for joining us.
They must also learn to share the land. Not all those vast tracts of land amassing it for themselves alone. There is a land lying fallow, but when you touch it, they say it belongs to somebody else, but they're doing nothing there because it's just a leverage for themselves.
You know, I've said this to white people that if you look at the Springboks, one of my favorite references, the Springbok rugby team led by Rassie Erasmus. The Springbok rugby team has managed to win World Cups back to back with a black captain, with black players, colored players, because they understood the vision. The vision is we're here representing South Africa to compete with the rest of the world, and we're going to take the best people. Not only are we going to take the best people, but we will intentionally invest in black and colored players so that when the day comes when we have to play England, when we have to play France, we can defeat them.
Even in business.
If we could get white people to see that from an economic perspective, that it is in your best interests to empower black, colored, Indian children, we can help you. Like Usia Kolisi, Cheslin Colby, we can help you beat the rest of the global economies. But as long as you keep us out, you won't be able to win.
It's not sustainable even economically because the clientele of the white business are blacks. And the labor of the white business is black. So if you close us out of the economy, World Bank said the problem about South Africa's economy is the smallness of its domestic market, which means only a few players are playing there and are white. And that's why your economy will never grow. And you lose. But if we can close you out, you will be out of business in one day.
Siyabonga.